Hey, so I guess we'll start. People will keep joining. So again, welcome back to 10ZiG's webinars and trainings. Today's topic is a very interesting topic. 10ZiG's and 10Zig has been working together for a very long time. And 10Zig this time is doing a great job with a new initiative that is around repurpose, the capabilities, the software that 10Zig gives to its resellers and customers to be able to repurpose laptops and PCs to extend their life cycle and to make sure that they get that secure operating system, the NOS or peak OS. It enhances your security exposure when you use 10Zig operating system and you repurpose your laptops and PCs to connect to your virtual environment. There's a lot more than that 10Zig does, which we will explore together today through a simple presentation done by James and then a demonstration by Stu. And without further ado, I would like to pass it to 10Zig team. And guys, thank you so much for your support to our region. And we're looking forward for an interesting training webinar and demonstration. Guys, for the audience, please feel free to ask questions. You can use the Q&A and chat if you want to, and we will try to address those questions throughout the webinar. So to you, James. Thank you all.
Thank you, Maud. Thank you to everyone who's joining today as well. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we're looking forward to telling you about our new initiative with RepurpOS, and also a few other things about 10Zig. So I'll jump into that now and share my screen, and hopefully we're able to.
Yes, I can see your screen, James.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so before we really get stuck into Repurpose, I'll tell you a bit about 10Zig, our other operating systems, our management tool, and our hardware as well. But I'll first introduce you to 10Zig. So we're a solely focused thin client vendor. We only make thin client operating systems and management tools and thin client hardware. We're headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's our 20th year in business this year. We've had our UK office for about 15-16 years, and in this office we support and build devices for your region. Our CTO is also based in the UK, and for the products that we distribute into the region, we work with 10ZiG's for that. So we are obviously going to talk about Repurpose today, but a big thing that's the main focus. But I'll tell you about our other operating systems, our management tool, and our hardware briefly as well. Before I do, there's some free things that you can get from us. So we can arrange free demo units. Our management tool is completely free. Our thin clients and zero clients include a 3-year advanced exchange hardware warranty. And we have 3 years of software support included with those as well. And you get access to the support team as well, included in your software support. So this is our 10Zig ecosystem. Our management tool is front and center. We have our hardware, operating systems, and Repurpose as well. In terms of our operating systems, when we sell thin client hardware, the majority of those devices that are shipped have this operating system called NOS, and then others have peak OS. The real difference between the two is that the zero client OS is focused just for one solution, so just for AVD or for Citrix or for VMware Horizon. Peak OS has everything inside it. They're both very secure. They're both locked down. They're both operating systems that you or your customers or end users cannot install things to. It's a locked down OS. This means that it's very stable and that it's very secure. We also offer 10IoT as well, which is a Windows OS that we can install on our thin and zero client hardware. So RepurpOS, which we're going to talk about in greater detail, is our lockdown Linux OS that supports all of the solutions with AVD, Citrix, VMware Horizon. You can run local browsers, whether it's Chrome or Firefox, and you can install it on third-party hardware. So you can repurpose existing thin clients, existing laptops, or PC hardware as well. You can also run it live from a USB stick. So you can, and Stu's going to show us how that works later on, but you can create a USB stick and use that as a DR solution, or if you've got users using BYOD, then you can give them a USB stick that has this OS installed on it, and then on demand they can turn that into a locked down, secure thin client OS to connect to your virtual environment. So one of the big announcements that we've had with Repurpose over the last month or so is that we've made this product now free to use and free to manage. So you can request a license from us for however many licenses you need, and we'll generate that for you. And then you can use Repurpose on existing hardware that you've got or USB sticks, and then just lock down those devices to connect into your virtual environment. We include all of the latest Citrix, AVD, VMware Horizon receivers, and that includes things like optimization packs for Teams, Zoom, and Cisco to ensure that your user experience is as good as it would be with one of our thin client or zero client devices. It's worth noting that when you do repurpose devices, it's important to remember that if you do have a requirement for Teams and Zoom and things like that, that you do have suitably powerful enough hardware. If you look at our hardware range, you can see that we split it up into 3 different sections, where the yellow section over here is what we class as an entry-level device. So it won't support Teams or Zoom or Cisco optimization, but it will do a standard connection. And then if you were to choose our hardware, you would choose, and you needed those types of functionality, you need a more powerful thin client. And indeed, if you needed quad screen or dual 4K, things like that, then you'd be over in this green section. And the same thing goes for repurposing your existing hardware. If you repurpose some very old thin clients or very low-powered laptops or low-powered PCs, you might struggle with performance because ultimately that endpoint needs to be able to handle the encoding and decoding of those video streams, as well as the virtual environment that you're connecting to. So just something to bear in mind. Now, all of our operating systems, including Repurpose, can be managed through the 10Zig Manager. This is our free management tool, and you can install it on premises. You can install it in Azure, in AWS, wherever you like. You can install this management tool, and you can then manage your thin clients, zero clients, or repurposed devices through 10Zig Manager for free. And this will allow you to automatically configure devices. It will allow you to remotely control them. It will allow you to shadow them. You can manage power and schedules, and even efficiently, if you're covered by software support, you can efficiently manage firmware updates as well with Repurpose. And you can also do this over the internet. So if you have home workers with repurposed devices, or you have remote devices, a remote site that you want to manage that isn't connected to your network, 10Zig Manager can handle that as well. It will create a bidirectional SSL tunnel over port 443, and you can encrypt that tunnel with certificates, so everything that you do is encrypted, and manage devices as if they're inside your network. So 10Zig Manager is really a very key part of the 10Zig ecosystem. It's essential for all of our solutions, and it's really like having an extra member of your team to look after your devices. It makes it very simple and easy.
James, for that SSL encryption, do you require the customer to have their own certificates to provide the certificates?
You don't have to. If the customer does have their own certificate available, either enterprise or an externally signed certificate, you can use those. But otherwise, you can use a self-signed certificate generated by the manager when you install it.
Great, awesome.
So we're really excited by Repurpose and what and how this can open the door to customers to use 10ZiG and to use our ecosystem of products. We can arrange free trials. You can download the product, and we can arrange free licenses for you, and you can use it straight away. So I think it's time to hand over to Stu, and he's going to give you a bit more of an overview of the product, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer any questions if anybody's got any for him as well.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you, Mode. So I'll just share my screen, and what we'll do is just have a quick look at a couple of slides that I've got, and then I will go into the demonstration. So just to give a little bit more detail about the RepurpOS specifically. So as James has already mentioned some of these items already, obviously you can use Repurpose live from a USB drive if you wanted to, just by plugging it into a third-party device and booting from that USB media. But then you can also have the ability to install the operating system onto that device and run it locally as well if you want to. There are other options to deploy Repurpose as well on a larger scale over the network using something like a software configuration manager, or using the Pixie boot imaging utility of the 10ZiG manager, which I'll show you a little bit later on. But the latest version, or the version about to be released, 16.5, uses an Ubuntu 22.04 kernel, so it is secure. And this is really good for us, because this means that we don't have to worry about certifying our operating systems independently, because Ubuntu do this already. So the 22.04 LTS kernel is already Cybersecurity Essentials certified, so it is a secure operating system. There is a very simple out-of-the-box experience as well, like a quick setup GUI, which I'll show you a little bit later on. But generally speaking, you should only really need to do that on a single device, and then using the power of the 10ZiG manager, you can automate the deployment for the rest of the devices by using our templates to automatically configure them. So James has already mentioned as well that one of the benefits of RepurpOS is that you can connect to pretty much all the different types of VDI platforms that are available, but then you've also got that added functionality of local browser support using either Google Chrome or Firefox. So again, if you wanted to use like a web RTC type application for something like Teams, or for a UC application, you could do that locally through the Chrome browser if it was supported. So there are some different modality options with RepurpOS, which I'll show you a little bit later on, in how it is experienced by the end user when the device boots up. So as I mentioned, we'll look at that in a moment. But the operating system itself is locked down, being an immutable operating system, so you can't install any type of Linux-based package to the OS. It will only allow you to install certain file types, but even then, it is only if you enable that functionality. So by default, you can't install anything. And when the device boots, all the OS is loaded into RAM, so at that point, there is nothing changed on the actual disk itself. So we do have support for all the major UC optimizations, So Teams, Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Cisco JVDI. Mainly it depends on the environment that you connect to, whether you're using VMware, Citrix, AVD, as to what is fully supported in terms of optimization. But we do have these included either with the specific clients themselves or available as add-ons as well, which can be installed at a later time on top of the base firmware. Similarly, we have further plugins for things like ControlUp and Liquidware for client and session monitoring as well, if you wanted to. So we'll look at the control panel later on. RepurpOS does have support for a local VPN client as well. So we take advantage of the Open Connect VPN client for this purpose. So that has a broad range of support for many different types of VPN hardware, including Cisco AnyConnect. There's also Global Protect VPN client support and Fortinet support in there as well. And then we'll look at the management side of things with 10Zig Manager in the demo part. So just one thing to sort of cover with the GUI side of things for RepurpOS. So we've now moved to a newer user interface, which is web-based. So we call it the HTML GUI. So the benefits of this is that what you look at in terms of configuration on the local client, if you were to go to that same configuration area on the 10Zig Manager, it will pretty much look identical. So you get a one-to-one experience across both the Repurpose device and the 10Zig Manager in terms of configuration, which makes it much more simpler and intuitive to use. The other major advantage of this is that the majority of changes can be done instantly. So they don't always require a reboot of the client unless you're doing something more specific, like the network changes to the IP configuration or whatnot, for example. So as I mentioned, there is further add-on support. So if you use the Repurpose-based firmware, we also provide add-ons which can allow you to be able to update individual UC optimization or plugins that can be used with the RepurpOS. But then also in between like quarterly releases for Citrix or VMware, for example, we will also, when they are available, publish the relevant clients as an add-on package. So you can install those on top of the base firmware if you needed it sooner than when we had the latest base firmware that would include that build within it. So that gives you a little bit more flexibility with being able to stay on top of the latest releases in between those sort of quarterly release schedules that we commonly stick to. So in terms of an out-of-box experience, this is an example of the quick setup wizard. So generally speaking, it would just ask you to accept the end user license agreement. Then you would choose the region where the device will be used, and that just configures things like the time zone and also the keyboard layout for your area. You'll also be asked to configure the time and date settings for the device, and also potentially connect to a network as well at this point if you haven't done automatically. Then it will take you into the connection manager so that you can potentially create some connections to your environments that you wanted to use. So the control panel itself is very simple. So it's split into 3 sections. So you've got applications at the top where you can create your different connection types to the different platforms, environments that you want to use. Then we've got hardware for any peripherals available on the device that you're using Repurpose from. This also allows you to be able to set up USB redirection if available with the platform. And then we've got some system level functionality as well, which we'll look at during the demo in a moment. So this gives you a better indication of the modality, which I mentioned previously. So with RepurpOS, you can have it boot to a more traditional sort of Linux-based desktop mode where you have a taskbar along the bottom, access to a almost like application menu, but then any connections that you create will be listed on the desktop screen here, so you can quickly get to them using these shortcuts. There is another alternative way of using RepurpOS, which is called the WBT mode, or Windows-based terminal. And basically, when the device boots up, you won't see the taskbar or the shortcuts on the background here. You'll just get a window which will give you a list of any connections that have been created on the client. And then finally, you can configure the RepurpOS to act almost like a zero client in a kiosk way of working, so that automates a specific application when it boots up. So you just have that solely as an experience for the end user. James has mentioned some of the manager functions, so we'll cover these during the demo as well. And then licensing. So James has touched on this already as well, but just to explain a little bit further. So with the licensing, we can provide you with the RepurpOS software, which you can download from a link which we provide. If you installed that RepurpOS onto a USB and used it from there, or onto a third-party device, you would be initially running it in licensed mode. So with this, it will give you full functionality of the RepurpOS operating system. But as you can see here, from time to time, you'll just get a pop-up window appearing, basically telling you that the device is running in demonstration mode. So that will appear randomly for your end users to have to clear using the close button. Also, firmware updates aren't available, and obviously technical support is unavailable as well. But then you can register for a free license, annual free license, which again will give you a full functionality, but this time round you won't see the pop-up window. So you can use RepurpOS fully, and you won't get the pop-up window, but still you are restricted in terms of being able to do any firmware updates, and also getting any technical support for if you have any issues with any third-party peripherals and things, for example. But then if you get fully support license, paid support license, you remove the pop-up window, but then you also get the firmware update support and access to technical support here as well. So requirements with the licensing: when you're using RepurpOS, you have to have the 10Zig manager, because the license is installed within the certificate manager, which is a part of the 10Zig manager suite. So the 10Zig manager is required for using either the free or support licensing methods mentioned here. Repurpose devices are required to connect to the 10Zig manager using the 10Zig Cloud connector. So this is again a part of the 10Zig manager suite. So this, James briefly mentioned this earlier on, creates a HTTPS tunnel between the client and the server, which can be secured using a certificate. But Repurpose devices have to be connected through to the manager using that mechanism so that they can be licensed. So for free or support license modes, a license certificate is required to be installed in the 10Zig manager cert manager, which I'll show you in a moment. But if you do register for a free license, or you've ordered the full support license, you will receive a certificate license, basically, which will be imported into the manager to give you the number of seats that you've ordered. So some options with deploying the manager: you can have it on premise. So as you can see here, we've got a 10Zig manager server with the 4 components that we normally install with that. Internally, you can have Repurpose devices connecting to the 10Zig manager server over the cloud connector. And then externally, those devices can also connect back to that manager server if it is set up over the network, so that you do have that external access. You can also install the 10Zig manager server in the cloud. So if you wanted to install it as a VM in Microsoft Azure or Amazon Workspaces, for example, you can do that. It's easily possible. So with the Cert Manager, this is available from the Start menu, 10Zig Manager Program Group. So if you do order a free or get the support license, you'll just come into this program and basically go to the Import Cert option here. And then you will locate your certificate file that we will have sent to you and import that into the system, and then that will give you a maximum number of devices which can then utilize that particular license. So it's not locked to an individual MAC address of any particular unit. It will just work on the first come first serve basis. So the first 50 devices in this example here will take the license. Any devices over that will then just go to the unlicensed way of working. So they will receive the pop-up window. If you wanted to install with the license, it has to be installed in the client. So you only need to do this really on a single device, and then you can pull that license file into a template in the manager, which can then be pushed out to additional devices. So you can do this locally on a client using a FAT32 formatted USB drive. So you just go into the control panel of the Repurpose device, initially security settings, enable the option install from USB, and then connect your USB device to the client. It will then show you hopefully this window, which is just the USB installer, where you can then select the Repurpose license file to be installed onto that device. Once that is done, or as an alternative method, you can also from the control panel go into the RepurpOS license applet, and if there is a license installed, you will see that within here. But again, if you wanted to, you can install the license using this button down here as well. So any questions on any of that so far, or shall I jump into the demo just to give you an example of using Repurpose and the 10ZiG manager?
Yes, actually, there is one question. It's Precious. She's asking if you want to modify the number of license and have to get another certificate file. Does that enables the desired number?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Okay, I'm gonna say exactly what she mentioned. So she want to know, so if I want to modify the number of license, that means I have to get another certificate file that enables the desired number?
Yes. So you would normally order, I would expect another license, which will be for the total number of devices, and you would install that to replace your previous license. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
Does that answer the question?
I think that answered the question.
Okay. So let's have a look then at the initial setup. So I've got in here, so normally if we do send over the RepurpOS to you, you'll get a link where you can download it from, and it normally comes in a zip or an archive package, which you just extract the contents to a folder on your machine. So then you can go into this folder here, RepurpOS installer, and literally just run the little utility that comes with it. And once this appears, if you've got a USB drive connected to your system, it will be available in this drop-down list here, and you would just select the USB drive that you wanted to install Repurpose to, and then literally just select the Repurpose package ISO, which is normally in the same folder. Click on open, and then you will start the process, and it will start building that USB drive with the RepurpOS installed on it, which you can then install or connect up to a third-party device, laptop, traditional fat desktop PC, or third-party thin client. And then if you boot to that device, it will then bring up this this screen here. So once you've booted from the USB that you've just created, you'll be given the option to go through the configuration wizard and set the device up and run it live from the USB if you wanted to. Alternatively, you can click on the installer button here, and it will then locate any drives that are available to install Repurpose to, and give you the option then to install onto the device itself. So you've got those two options when booting from the Repurpose USB. You can actually go through the configuration wizard here, which we will do. Choose United Kingdom, so don't mess up with my keyboard mappings. And just set the time and date. And then it'll just refresh the desktop, and pretty much then you can start configuring the client. So my system is a little bit slow. So now it's booted back up, the desktop's refreshed. You can create some connections here if you wanted to. And if you shut down this device and then rebooted it another time, those connections would still be persistent. So you can still use those connections on this live USB if you wanted to. But again, you can still install it onto the local device natively if you wanted to, using the installer icon up here. So I'll just switch over to my other Repurpose machine, and we can have a look at some other things that you can do within the OS. So I'll just close that down. So just going into so here I have got the control panel. So if you wanted to create a connection, you can just go to new connection. So as James mentioned earlier on, we do support AVD and Windows 365 through this operating system just by creating a Microsoft remote desktop connection. So it could just go into here and give it a connection name. So it's the demo, for example. There are a number of different options, obviously, through a lot of these connection configuration areas. But just for test purposes here, I'll just enter our domain and pretty much just press OK there. So I've now got two AVD connections and also a web browser connection available. If I wanted to laptop's probably grinding to a halt with the screen sharing, but so what we could do is run that browser session if we wanted to, which will take us to the 10zig website homepage. Yeah, that's gone very slow. So I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do it from the USB session. So let's create some new connections. So I'll just create a Microsoft AVD connection. that connection is created. If you wanted to, you can create a new connection for the browser. Let's call it 10zig. And you can set this to be a kiosk browser if you wanted to. So if you wanted to lock it down so only that URL is accessible, so it doesn't show the address bar, we can set it to kiosk mode here so that those pages are only accessible from the browser session. But otherwise, it can be a fully functional browser. This shows the browser. Go into the URL for 10zig, and then also if we go into the AVD. And if you do have multiple connections, you can switch between them using the taskbar. An icon will appear down here when the session is running. So you can always switch between different desktops or published applications if you need to, if they are running separately. So then we could log into our AVD environment as well if we wanted to. So you just got the login screen. And it supports MFA. And then we have access to our resources. So once you're logged into AVD or W365, any resources you've got available to you will be listed here, and you can run them as separate sessions. And again, you can switch between them from the taskbar down here. But as you can see also, they are presented on the desktop as well as shortcuts. So if you did want to access them directly from the desktop as well. So I'll just show you some other functions of RepurpOS, and then we'll look at the management tool. So you can lock down the control panel. So by default down here, we have the menu. So you can obviously get in here and create connections or get to the connection manager, for example, or the control panel. So to secure that from the end users, we have got the option here to enter a password when you access the control panel. And then you've also got these options here. So you can still give your end users power over their desk space. So if you wanted them to have control of the displays, if they've got multiple displays, they can set the primary, secondary monitors, the orientation. If they're using various headsets and they might be hot plugging them, then they could have access to the audio properties to be able to configure those. We could remove access to the keyboard properties or the mouse properties. But if there were home workers, they may wish to jump onto their home wireless networks. So we can give them access to the network configuration area so that they can scan for any wireless SSIDs to be able to then connect to. And now you can see that going back into the control panel, it requires a password now, so it is secured. Just one other thing from in there as well. You have install from USB. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the operating system is secure, so you can't install files to the device. So if you do wish to upload things like a background wallpaper to customize the device, then you would first need to enable this option here, and then you should be able to connect your USB drive to that device, and it will then allow you to be able to upload, for example, a desktop background wallpaper to replace this grey screen here. There are some sort of generic 10Zig ones available to you, which are within the desktop applet here. And so we can change the background wallpaper to something if we wanted to do that. That, for example. So sticking to the control panel, as you can see here, you've got the connection manager, which just shows you any connections that you've got created. And this is similar to the Windows-based terminal modality. If you use that, it will just display this window, which gives you access to be able to run those different connections available. Then you've got the ability to be able to set up further Citrix settings, Improvata, or VMware settings as well, if you're looking to connect to those environments. As I mentioned, you've got the ability to be able to control any peripherals connected to your client as well. And then down here, we've got auto shutdown. So you can set a time setting for when the device should be shut down, say 10 p.m. We can upload custom certificates or your own enterprise certificates to devices if they are needed. The cloud manager, this is important. So this is obviously with the repurposed devices to allow them to connect to the 10Zig manager over the cloud connector. So your devices can learn this using a DNSSRV record internally. Alternatively, we can enter a manual address in here for those devices to connect to the manager. And then, as you can see here, we've looked at the power options. You can set an idle timer. If the device is idle, it logs you off your session or puts the device into a sleep state, or shuts it down completely if you wanted to. And then you've also got down here the ability to look at further system information, and also to change the settings of the VNC service, which is normally used for the remote shadowing to provide remote support from the 10Zig Manager console. So once you're happy with your repurpose setup, you've got your connections configured, you've got any backgrounds and repurpose licenses installed on the client, then you can look at the manager to create a template, which can then be used to automatically deploy to further devices to make it easy for that initial deployment. So let's pop over to the 10Zig Manager console. So this is an instance of a 10Zig Manager. So just to show you here, we've got the certificate manager, which I mentioned before. So this is where we can actually install our license file. If you have received a free license or a paid for support license, it can just be imported directly into here. Repurposed devices are normally managed through the 10Zig Manager web console. So if we just log into this, which is accessible through a browser. So this is the typical view of the web-based manager console. So devices can be detected using a broadcast, or we can enter IP ranges to discover devices. Alternatively, we can also use, as I mentioned before, a DNSSRV record to point the devices to the manager when they boot up. So any devices that have been seen by the manager will be listed here by default. Down at the bottom, you've got a job log of any processes that have been performed from the manager to those devices. And then on the left-hand side here, we've got our groups, which add the additional power to be able to auto-configure the clients and also manage firmware updates and things moving forwards. So just seeing what these devices up here, you can see various information about them, including their host name, IP information and MAC information. It will tell you the platform that the device is running, and also if there's a hardware model, it will be listed here. So with Repurpose, that will normally come up as RPOS in that column. You can also see the version of firmware, and also if there's any template that's been applied to any individual device, that will be listed here as well. You can add further columns just by right-clicking, and then you've got some additional entries here as well that you can add in to be able to see further information. If you right-click on an individual device, if the device is online, you can reboot and shut it down. If it's offline and you support Wake on LAN internally on the network, you can wake it up. We can set scheduled tasks, which we'll mention in a moment. But configuration wise, we can retrieve an individual device's configuration. And then once that has been retrieved, you can go to edit. And then you should be able to configure that device in a similar way to you would do locally on that client. So if we went into, for example, the AVD connection we created earlier, edit, it looks the same setup and look and feel as what we saw on the actual Repurpose client as well. So you can see in there all the same information, which you can edit and then send back to the device to change that setup. So that is pretty much the same experience. You've got applications there, hardware and system functions, which you can go into similar to the control panel from the local client. Say no to that now. But generally speaking, what we would normally do with a new deployment is set up a single device and generate a template from that, which can then be rolled out to further units using the group. So if here we'll just generate a template, we'll give it a name, DistiLogics, demo. And then once that has been created, what we can do is with the groups over here, you can create a group, and then you've got the option set auto population filters. So devices can be added into a group automatically when they register into the manager. And you can do it by platform. So the operating system being used. So obviously if you're using Repurpose, it is Linux based. You can also filter by firmware version, which can be useful for when you're performing firmware updates over time. Individual device MAC addresses, you can filter by device model. So with Repurpose, that's not so relevant because they will all be classed as RPOS devices. Internally, a lot of customers will normally filter on an IP address range for either a VLAN or a remote site, for example. So you can configure that option here and enter the IP address range that you want to use if you wanted to. Alternatively, you can filter on individual host names and also a cloud agent registration code, which is particularly useful for if you're connecting devices from remote locations, so home workers or for example, because it's difficult to see what addresses they're going to be coming in on to match. We can use a registration code to be able to match those devices. So once those auto population filters are configured, if a device which is registered into the manager matches those filters, they will be added automatically into the group, at which point you can then configure that device further. So you can update the firmware or downgrade it, as the case may be, which it will do first if it's not at the correct level specified by the group. And also, in one moment, you can change the name of the devices as well. So automatically name the clients. So we can put in here a prefix name. And then you can choose either an index, say of 4 digits, which will go from 0001 up to 9999, or you can specify a portion of that device's MAC address. So you could say the last 6 digits of the MAC address should be used as the host name. So those devices will have their names changed when they are added into that group. And then lastly, if you want to push out the template that we created a moment ago from that single device to a number of devices that are being added into this group, you just need to apply the template at the group level. So let's have a look for that Distalogics demo 2 template we created. So now that is added, that would then be pushed out to any clients that register into the group, and they will be ready to use in a similar way to that device that we just looked at a moment ago. So that's the groups and how that can be used to automate and sort of deploy your devices much more quickly. With the templates, so you can access the templates from here. So sometimes it's a good practice to be able to sort of select a template. And if you want to leave that as like a golden image, you can copy it to create a duplicate. And then if you wanted to, you can go into that template. And in a similar way to an individual device, you can modify the settings of that template. So you can come in here, you can create additional connections, modify any existing connections, or change the application hardware or system settings of that configuration template here as well. So firmware updates, if you don't do it at the group level, you can do it individually by selecting the device and then going to firmware update. And you will just need to obtain the latest firmware package, at which point you can then select that and push it out to the individual device if you wanted to. We can also download log files if you're troubleshooting any problems that the user might have reported, which can be done here as well. And that will then be saved centrally in the 10ZIG Manager console, making it easy for you to then provide those to the support team. Over here in the sort of MMC GUI, which is a slightly different user interface, we've got the image recovery. So this is another way that you could potentially use to deploy your RepurpOS instead of doing it via the USB. So you could set up an individual Repurpose device and potentially back that up to the manager as an image, which you could then pixie boot to further devices to then push out those and automatically set them up. So that is another option for deploying Repurpose that you can do directly from the 10ZiG Manager. Alternatively, you can use third-party SEM tools for that purpose. And then also we can VNC onto the devices so that you can shadow those clients to provide remote support to those end users if they do have a particular issue. Just another thing quickly. So popping into this area here. So we do have the role administration, which if the manager that you've installed the software to is joined to your domain, this can link into your Active Directory and pull through any groups and user details, which can be added into either these default groups here, administrators and technicians, or you can create your own groups for your own sort of permission settings. So by default, for example, the administrators have full control. They can do things like reboot, shut down, factory default devices, or modify an individual device's client configuration or template configuration. But the technicians themselves are more limited in what they can do. So they can't factory default, but they can VNC, reboot and shut down devices, and they can't edit any device configurations or any templates as well. So they are just two example groups that are available by default, but you can create your own custom roles in here and add users from Active Directory as you wish. There is also a very sort of pretty wallboard available as well. So this over time can give you a bit of a better indication of what versions of firmware you may have on your Repurpose estate. So as you can see here, you can set up different windows which will show you whether devices are available, and also split down the number of devices that are running on particular firmware versions, for example. And you can create additional windows with different information as well from this area here. So that's pretty much a quick sort of overview of Repurpose and the 10Zig Manager. We'll probably draw into the end of the session. So does anybody have any specific questions on anything that they've seen so far or not seen?
I have a comment. We talked a lot, or Stu talked a lot about Windows 365 and AVD, but it also applies to Citrix virtualized environments. You can also build those connections with VMware virtualized environments. So it works with all of that. You can, it's the same similar set of configurations, it's just different platforms, and it's ready for all of that. But you know, now AVD and Windows 365 is like booming big time. So lots of customers, you will meet lots of customers that are considering AVD big time or Windows 365, right, Stu?
That's right, yeah.
There is the Citrix configuration and VMware and all of that. It's just a matter of configuration as per your demand and requirement. Yep.
Else?
Great. So is there more from the demo you want to show, Sue, to the audience? Yeah. Can you hear me, Stu?
Sorry, what was that, Mood?
And I said, so are you done with the demo?
Yes, that's pretty much wraps up the demo side of things. Hopefully that's given you a better overview of Repurpose and the manager for now. We can share the PowerPoint slides as well that we showed, even though this is recorded, but yes, they could be available after the session.
Great. So thank you, Mayo, for that. Yes, it was a nice demo. So the main purpose of today's demo is to show you the capabilities you get from RepurpOS, which is a technology software that helps you from 10ZiG, that helps you to repurpose your old laptops and PCs and then extend their lifetime. Could be as easy as just having a USB memory stick, or just reshuffle the whole laptop and change it to have the new operating system from 10ZiG. And remember, that operating system does really add a great amount of security to your environment, because it's way more secure than the thick laptop operating system, whether it's the Windows operating system or the Linux operating system. But as also James mentioned, 10ZiG has lots of other products. So zero clients and thin clients ready hardware. They all can be managed through the same management platform, which is the 10ZiG Manager. And that 10ZiG Manager comes for free. So you can download it and install it on-prem or in a cloud instance, and then start managing all of your endpoints, whether it's a zero client, a thin client, or a Repurpose laptop or PC. That's probably my concluding statement. James, do you have anything else to add here to the audience?
Thank you to everybody who joined today and all of the questions. If you'd like to download Repurpose, you can do it via our website, and we can send over the software for you to get started today.
Great. So our target is to get customers to test that RepurpOS software, which is a great starting point with your customers, and then sell them the support version so that they can get firmware upgrades, they can get access to the technical team and support team from 10ZiG. So we sell the support licenses. They can use it for free, they can download it for free, but we sell the support license where they can get more, they get firmware upgrades, and they get the access to the technical team. And James just added the link so that where you can find the download link for RepurpOS. And I think that's it for today's webinar and training. It was an awesome live presentation and demonstration. Thank you so much for the 10ZiG team. They're always there to support. Just a message away. Now that's it. One click away. Thank you so much. Thanks to the audience today. Thank you guys. We depend a lot on you on educating customers. And whenever you need support with downloading and operating that or configuring that RepurpOS, will be there to help. You can reach out to DistiLogix directly, us or to 10Zig. We'll be happy to support. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. Thank you, James.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for
Have a good evening all.
Thank you guys. Good evening.
Thank you guys. You then. Bye.